Chapter 21. I walked out of that house and down through the garden in a daze. I slumped over my bed in the dark, watching the lights of the Almeida Maybach roll down the drive. What the hell just happened? Whatever did happen, one thing for sure was that it wasn't all in my head. It wasn't just my wild imagination. It was real. Black and white fucking real. And let's face it, my dark little secret wasn't just mine anymore. It was out. Marcus Almeida, my boss, now knew I had a thing for him. Fucking shit. I cringed, burying my face into the blankets, just wanting to die. Why did I have to offer to do that? Why? Why? Oh, I don't want to lose my job. Fuck, Bonnie, fuck. Sighing sharply, I rolled on my side and glanced out over the bed of scarlet roses beside my terrace, their petals highlighted by the soft light of the rising moon. Eventually, I crawled off my bed and unclipped the floor-length glass doors, pushing them against the wall and allowing for the full gust of crisp night air to flood through my bedroom. I flopped back on my bed. My confusion tormented me like a bully in a schoolyard. I wanted to cry, but I had no tears. It was dinner time, but I wasn't even hungry. Through my anguish, I gradually fell asleep, the mountain wind gently caressing my face and comforting my unease. Several hours later, I woke up. I glanced at my cell phone. 10:03 p.m. I decided I needed a long soak in the bath. Good idea, Bunny. I lit some candles, put some relaxing music on, and quickly slipped into the warm, oily water. I lay my head back, thinking of a plan of how I will act when I see Marcos next, if I'm not fired first. Just pretend nothing happened, Bonnie. Be professional. Will he say anything? Maybe he'll tell April. God, no. But why did he look at me like that? It wasn't normal. An hour later, I got out and dressed into my comfy robe, tying it loosely at the front. I suddenly felt starving. I hadn't eaten since lunch at Baccara, and I had no food in my quarters, so I decided I would sneak into the house and find something to eat. And besides, April wouldn't mind. She was always telling me to eat more anyway. Barefoot, I crept out through the door and tiptoed amongst the shaded gardens into the house, quietly shutting the door behind me. The house was dark and dead quiet. Good. Henry must be at Seth's. I turned the pantry light on and glanced through the endless shelves of food. Food, food, food. And none of it was on my diet, but after tonight, who cares? I deserved it. I opened the fridge and saw some delicious sushi in takeout containers. I grabbed the tray and pinched a couple of pieces, hungrily shoving them into my mouth. I quickly became lost within the decadence of that fridge. Good evening. A deep, familiar voice murmured quietly. I felt a sharp pain slice through my heart. Oh, fuck no. I swear to God, I almost dropped the tray of sushi on the floor out of fright, amongst other things. I glanced up with my cheeks full of rice and seaweed, and there was Marcos, sexy, disarming, and ridiculously gorgeous, having that late night feel about him. His bow tie was hanging around his neck, untied again. Oh my God, how How could life be so cruel? Chapter 22. I prayed that I would just die right at that moment. I held my hand up to my mouth, suffocating through my disgusting embarrassment. Jesus! I gasped, clutching my chest, forcing the sushi down my throat uncomfortably fast and thrusting the tray back into the fridge. You scared the hell out of me! Marcos was tickled. He had caught me red-handed sneaking around the kitchen. Sorry, he snickered, thoroughly amused, throwing his arm over the doorway, just like he did the other night. What are you doing home? I glared at him. I had a small teleconference with a business partner in Greece. As you do? Oh, I see. What are you doing? He smirked, raising his eyebrows suspiciously. I'm trying to recover from a coronary, I muttered, tightening up my loosened robe. He laughed heartedly, his voice bouncing off the high walls. He's never going to forget this. Have you got a minute? He asked politely. I want to show you something before I head back to the party. Sure, I smiled. What could you possibly have to show me, Marcos Almeida? Follow me, he murmured with a sharp flick of his head. Marcos quickly turned on his heel and walked through the darkened house with me, following beside him. We swiftly went through the back door and began winding up through the gardens. I quickly realized where we were going. Excitedly, I glanced up toward that dark office, drenched in the hazy moonlight, listening to his black suede lace-ups crunch over the gravel. And here's me, total moron, a head full of wet hair, barefoot, straining to keep up with his pace. Like the only time I decide to wear no shoes, go Bonnie. Sensing my struggle, Marcos quickly took my hand. Come on, he chuckled under his breath, giving it a small squeeze. The angst melted away from my heart at the instant touch of his skin, feeling as his fingers gently meshed into mine. It was electric, and it felt so right. I was floating on air. This cannot be real right now. That's what I believed, but no, it was real. We finally reached the top of the bluff, becoming immersed within the dark shadows cast across the ridges of the Santa Ynez Mountains. It's a beautiful night, Marcos murmured, peering out over the calm ocean, bathing in the moon's dull glow. It is, I smiled, blown away that although we had reached the top, Marcos was still holding my hand. Pressing his thumb on a fingerprint lock, Marcos waited until the door clicked and the opaque glass rimming his expansive office became transparent. He pushed it open and dropped my hand. Ah, drat. Welcome, he said quietly, dim light from all directions immediately flooding an exquisite lobby corridor. Wow, I gasped, my eyes observing the incredible furnishings lining the walls as we walked past them. I glanced down at the harlequin marble floor, feeling its coldness press against my feet. Ah, my refuge, Marcos sighed slowly. I could see that he adored this place by the change of his face. Coming out of the long corridor, we stepped down a shallow stairway into a circular room lined with herringbone floorboards. I knew immediately that this place was the hub of his office. So, this is where all the magic happens, I muttered with a smile, glancing at the rounded desk fitted with a desktop Mac and 2 MacBooks. Not all the magic, he said with a raised eyebrow, but a lot of it. I felt myself blush instantly. Nice words, Bonnie. Real nice. Beside a cinema projector screen, my eyes were drawn to a sofa surrounding a coffee table piled with Sebastião Salgado's books. No, I gasped, stumbling toward them. Marcus had all of Salgado's books. He blew me away. I glared at him with disbelief. I'm speechless, I stammered, covering my mouth. You're not the only fan, he grinned, those dimples thawing my heart. I could not believe this man Marcus Almeida. He was full of surprises. Come, he gestured with his head. I have something to show you. Trailing behind him, we walked into the magnificence of a dark, semicircular library, towering with bookshelves lined with thousands of books, complementing several scattered sofas, a carved limestone fireplace, and of course, those sweeping views of the northern coastline. Are you ready? He said, glancing at me through the dark. Maybe? I answered nervously. Close your eyes. Oh, shit. What on earth for? My heart thumped out of my chest as I reluctantly closed my eyes. Chapter 23. Suddenly I heard a click, and my eyelids were full of light. Open your eyes, Marcos spoke softly. As I did, my eyes fell over several glass cabinets engulfed in warm light, containing the most gut-wrenching, priceless ancient artifacts. I even recognized some of them. Holy shit. My heart hurt. Oh, Marcos, I muttered, feeling a lump rise painfully in my throat. How? I clutched my chest, delicately creeping toward them in awe. He came beside me with a small, appeased smile. I knew you'd like them. I peered at the precious bronze bust, innocently staring back at me behind the glass. This is the bronze bust of King Sargon of Akkad, he said. The Mesopotamian king, I murmured, astonished. Yes, Marcus nodded. I turned and glimpsed into another cabinet, housing a heavy block of sandstone with intricately chiseled hieroglyphs. Cartouche of Ramesses II, he said quietly. I glared at him incredulously. How did you get these? It comes back to that body language thing, he said, giving me an evasive smile. Oh, of course it does, I said sarcastically, quietly nodding. How could I forget? I secretly hoped he wouldn't go back to the Dalton party so I could be with him in that office all night. You know, I seldom have anyone in my office, even Ibra. I feel honored, Marcos, I replied, looking at him. Truly, thank you for introducing me to your ancient friends. He gazed at me for a few moments. I just ask one thing of you before I go back to the party. Oh, God, what? Sure, I stammered, trying my best to appear calm. Would you please fix my tie? Oh no, not again. Yes, I smiled, of course. Marcus turned and stood in front of me as I took the bow tie from around his neck. I watched the smile quickly fall from his face, stinging me with those eyes. Those eyes that haunt me, torment the darkest parts of my soul. His breath caressed my face, heavier than before, summoning my burning lust, violently rising within me, and there was no escaping it. Breathe, Bonnie. Just breathe. I tried to be normal. I tried, but my eyelids began fluttering like excited butterflies as I silently fumbled with that silk fabric. I tried to ignore that big protruding vein throbbing through his neck. I tried to avoid those dark, pervading eyes, watching my every fractional movement. But quite simply, I was just an invitation for disaster. And then it happened. Carefully, Marcus moved his body in closer, pressing his groin up against mine. I died, over and over and over again. My breath was aggressively snatched from my lungs as the bow tie fell from my fingers. I could feel myself plunging helplessly to the floor, my knees collapsing beneath me. But just in the nick of time, Marcus's strong hands gripped my trembling wrists, swiftly pulling me against his muscular chest and enveloping me within his warm, comforting arms. I had at last, finally, succumbed to the irresistible wrath of Marcus Almeida that had invaded me like the plague. Tears began to glaze over my besieged eyes as we stood there, holding each other within a long, fragile silence. His hands tenderly rubbing over the length of my back, pressing his fingers through my painful affliction. He eventually drew away, seemingly about to kiss me, yet instead, he gently, very gently, yanked my head to the side, and I quickly felt his yielding mouth touch my ear. I know your secrets, Bonnet, he whispered, his hot breath cavorting down my ear canal. I was gone. Clutching my face with a steadfast grip, Marcus returned his sharp gaze into my eyes. He watched, he waited, poised and controlled, quietly sharing my breath. And then finally, no longer wanting to resist me, he pressed his deliciously soft lips onto mine, kissing me desperately, inviting me into another world, a world only accessible through taste and touch, and he very much knew the way. With slow urgency, he gently thrust his wet tongue deep into my mouth, allowing me to taste his prolific passion. This man wanted me to know exactly who he was, and I knew from that moment on, just from that one kiss alone, I would never be the same. I quickly surrendered to his advances as I felt my body becoming primal. My inner thighs were beginning to slip with warm wetness running down my legs. I shuddered. It had been so long since I was touched. And Marcus Almeida was not only touching me, but he was destroying me. And I wanted to be destroyed. My body was begging for it, begging to be torn apart and fucked uninhibitedly. I needed to feel like a woman again. He pulled me closer and thrust his stiffening package in between my moistened thighs as his hungry hands slowly found their way inside my robe, running them over the curve of my backside until his fingers slipped within the lips of my wanton wetness. "You cannot hide your secrets from someone like me," he whispered through my moaning, one hand clenched in my hair, the other slowly rubbing my dripping sex. He was killing me. "Marcos," I cried through my panting breaths. "Shh," he murmured, his tongue running up the side of my neck and into my hairline, deftly marking his territory. "I'll take care of you." I had, in no uncertain terms, fallen under the spell of Marcos Almeida. And then the worst thing ever. His cell phone began buzzing in his pocket. He let it ring out, and then again. He let it ring out. It rang like a bitch. "Oh, come on," I gasped, exasperated. "Trust the damn phone to spoil the moment." "I have to go," he whispered, reluctantly pulling his face away. I nodded. Please fix my tie," he murmured, retying my robe for me. "Sure," I gave him a small smile. I knelt down and picked the bow tie up off the floor and quickly tied it around his neck. "You're an amazing woman," he spoke softly, pulling my damp hair out of my face. "I knew my life would change when I saw you. I could feel it." That lump in my throat reared its ugly head again. "Come on, Bonnie, hold it together." "I thought it was all in my head," I choked, barely able to get the words out. "I'm always watching," Marcos muttered, pressing his hands into the sides of my face. "Don't you feel my eyes?" A tear trickled down my face. "More than words," I whispered. Marcus nodded, wiping my tear with his thumb, and kissed me tenderly. And without any other words spoken, he took my hand within his and walked me out of his office and back down through the dark gardens. We stopped under a big olive tree, shivering within the high night winds and draping its dancing shadows across our silhouettes. Marcos raised a finger to his mouth silently, glancing at me with those endless dark eyes. He gave the side of my face a soft squeeze and kissed it gently. "Good night," he whispered, pulling away. "Good night." I watched his black shadow weaving through the dark gardens, back down toward the waiting Maybach. He opened the back door, climbed in, and then slowly rolled down the drive. I sighed deeply, comforting my beating chest within my hand, and leaned up against the trunk of that old olive tree. Everything was going to change. Chapter 24. That disgusting, terrible sound of the helicopter woke me up at 7 a.m. 7 a.m. on a Sunday! I peeled open my tired eyes and greeted the morning dawn, quickly glimpsing Marcos walking toward the helicopter. No! I fell out of my bed and stumbled toward the window in my silk chemise, watching Marcos, dashing as ever, clad in a navy pinstriped suit, clutching a briefcase, talking to the co-pilot. The co-pilot duly nodded, ducked his head, and climbed into the front seat. To my surprise, Marcos stopped for a second and then turned over his shoulder, glancing in my direction. He saw me. My heart exploded. "Don't leave me, Marcos." My desperate face pleaded with his. He stared at me for several moments until finally crawling into the helicopter. I sighed with disappointment, running my hand down the glass of the window. Our eyes locked as the chopper rose from the ground, only to be torn away when it changed directions, flying down over the mountains towards Santa Barbara. I glumly fell onto my bed and rolled around for the next 2 hours, reliving last night's furtive encounter over and over again. It's sick, I know. A little while later, I glimpsed Lola strolling down the garden path toward my quarters with what appeared to be a package. She peered at me through the glass of the door and smiled. I gestured for her to come in. "Good morning, Miss Bonnie." She opened the door. "Morning, Lola." I smiled, petting for her to come and sit next to me on the bed. I frowned at the unmarked black box curiously. "Senor told me to give this to you." "Oh, thanks," I answered, hugging her affectionately around her torso. "How's April this morning?" Madame is bad," she sighed. "Hangover." "Oh no," I cringed at her. "She vomit on the side of toilet." Jesus Christ, April? Ugh. I squirmed. "I feel sorry for you, Lola." No problemo, Miss Bonnie," she quickly answered without a fuss. "It's my job." "Where did Senor go today in the helicopter?" I wondered. He go to San Jose," she replied, rubbing my shoulder. "He be back tonight." God, I hope so. "I go now. I help Madame." Lola put a gentle hand on my head. "Tell Madame I will be in shortly for breakfast." Lola nodded, got up, and shut the door behind her. I glanced at the box, wondering what on earth was inside. Slowly opening it, I glimpsed an immaculate gold iPhone. And not just a plated gold iPhone, but a 24-karat gold iPhone. I ran my fingers over the engraved writing. Gold & Co., London. Wow. I had never even touched real gold, let alone owned something. I was smacked. I pulled it from the box and turned it over, noticing a post-it note stuck on the screen with a message scribbled in pencil. "Call me, 310-414-000. Burn this after you save the number. Keep it silent and discreet, please." I automatically smiled, feeling my body turn to honey. "Marcos," I whispered, lovingly running my finger over the smooth surface. I plugged it into the wall to charge and stood there with a finger on my lips, wondering where to hide it. Eventually, I shoved it inside a pillow cover. No one would find it. I had a million pillows piled on my bed. I quickly threw my hair on top of my head, jumped into some sweats and slippers, and dragged myself up to the house for breakfast.